Blog Talk Radio.
Greetings, everyone. Here we are again at another session of enlightenment and transformation, expressing itself through the foundational Fridays components. I am your host, Yuya, Assaan-ANU, and even though I always express to you that I'm excited and grateful and happy to be here in this space and time, which I truly am, not to sound mushy, but I'm actually a little bit more excited because I was able to come to you live today, which is a rare treat for me. A lot of times I have to end up pre-recording my shows because of my reading schedule, my consultations, and other work that I'm involved in outside and inside of this work. So what I usually do is I pre-record the shows like in the AM hours, and then when 6:30 comes, I basically just hit play and go back to working with my client or whatever it is that I have to do. So to be live and in the flesh in this session is wonderful for me, and I'm thankful for it. But so this show, we're going to be dealing with the concept of the spiritual family. And I know, obviously it has the word spiritual in it, but one of the things that we may think about, well, what does the family have to do? This is a spiritual show about Orisha and so forth and so on. And that's one of the things specifically that I kind of wanted to tap and get into is the separation between the manifestation of our inner life and what we consider to be our spiritual life. I remember there was a show I did some time ago where I spoke about that with a student, and I said, she had mentioned, she was telling me something about what was going on with work, and she said, well, in my real life, I have to do this and do that. So she considered the work that she did spiritually to be like, I guess, a hobby almost. And what's happening in the mundane world, which is really an expression of what's happening spiritually, was real, where that's the most contrived and artificial environment that you could possibly have. So a lot of times what we do is we separate what's going on within our family structures and our inner circle from what's going on within our internal community. And I get a lot of people through readings and consultations who come with this issue, and it's a little hard sometimes to get it through their heads that this is an issue that it's not going to resolve itself through overshooting it with ritual and with prayer. That's not hitting the core of the problem. So what I figured I'd do is to try to keep things real simple this Friday is I really just wanted to speak about the primal and simplistic representation of the core family. And reason being, too, is because I probably say 85 to 90% of the people who come to me, at some point, there's discussions about relationships, intimacy, spouses, children, so forth and so on. As many of you know, my pivot is the Yoruba system. And I say pivot because, like I've said to you many times, this is not an Orisha show. This is not a Yoruba show. But that is my pivot. That is where I come from, per se. And that is the bulk of my studies revolves around Ifa. Okay? But with that, Ifa is very big on family. Okay, so when a lot of us get into these systems, and one of the reasons some people want to get initiated, I get this a lot, is because they've had a traumatic breakup or situation, and now I'm doing me, and I just want to focus on me and my spirituality. I hear that one, and that is so off from the actual design of what Ifa is, or even voodoo. Even in definition, the names, they imply family. Okay, and community, but more specifically, family. stated to you all several times that family is the highest science, and even after student initiations and certifications, I always remind my students that family is critical. Okay, not only the creation of family, but the sustaining of such. So I'm not one who looks to have a cadre of single people, and especially we know in the Orisha community, it's mainly ran or dominated by women, by single women. That's no big secret. And then of course you have your Babalaos, and everybody goes to Baba, very similar to the church, which are dominated by women, and here we go, effeminate males. Okay, and I've heard some stories. I haven't really visited any Ilays where I've seen an overabundance of effeminate males, but I've heard some stories as of late about certain types being in certain Ilays, whether they be effeminate males or transsexuals. I'm understanding that's a new thing now within the Ilays. And, I would have to say my thing with that, because people always want my opinion on that. And to be honest with you, I'm not a dissexual myself, so I don't really have hands-on experience as to how that affects one's spiritual perception and outlook. I can speak to, as I'm going to speak about today, the natural effects and the natural positioning and the core original positioning of our sexuality. But if a transsexual, which I have as clients as well, if they want to come to an understanding and learn some things, I'm all for that. I'd actually prefer that, because if we feel that life choice, or that sex choice, which is probably a better way to say it, is a choice in itself, and it's a choice that's based off of programming, or external factors, even diet, social construct, then who would better need and benefit from ancient, powerful teachings? Okay, so I don't really look to exclude populations of people who don't live a sex style that's in alignment with my own. Now, that's in my teaching. My teaching environment is not my inner environment. Of course, the majority of my students have never been to my home. I don't call them on my off hours, my leisure time, which there's pretty much none of anyway. But, so our personal opinions about things and what really is, sometimes it's none of other people's business for us to feel we need to espouse what we think about them and what they're doing. I'll give a quick example before we get into our lesson a little bit more. I was in a bookstore the other day picking up a book I had on order, and I ran into someone who read my book, and he said, wow, I recognize you and, enjoyed your work and everything. And somehow we got on the subject of language and Latino, which is really African culture. And I brought up the movie Apocalipto. I don't know. Well, you know which one I'm talking about. That's what it is when you do it live. I can't stop and go back and pronounce it better. But anyway, it was the one that was produced by Mel Gibson. So he was like, yeah, that was a great movie. I love Mel Gibson's work. But, and then he kind of felt uncomfortable. This was a Caucasian man. And he said, and of course we know about the statements Mel Gibson made about, to his ex-wife, I hope you get jumped by a pack of niggas, and the other racist rants that he went on to make. And, so he felt a little uncomfortable when he first said, well, I like Mel Gibson. Then he kind of paused, and I said, well, I like Mel Gibson too. I like his work. I love The Road Warrior. I love, Apocalypto. Oh, man, I messed it up again. Next week. I'll say it better next week. But anyway, I love his movies. I never saw The Passion because I'm just not interested. But I explained to him, I said, listen, I said, what he does in his private time is his business. If he has a prejudice against melanated people, what business is that of mine? I'm valuing him and assessing him as an artist. And the reality is his ex-wife who recorded those phone calls, that was a violation of his privacy. That was none of our business. So in the same instance, and as I explained to you, I'm sure there's a lot of Hollywood producers and directors who have similar notions and concepts. But as I've told you all several times, not to say that you totally exclude the teacher from the teaching, but especially when you're dealing with indigenous information, indigenous culture, a lot of the sources that you're going to get it from are not necessarily going to be sources that you're totally comfortable with. And that's just more of a call on the charge for those of us who have the information to actually put out more works, to write more books, to, do videos and to create more forums and groups and so forth and so on. All right. So that's, addressing really the dissexual situation that people have asked me about and effeminization. No, I'm not for it. But I don't exclude people because of it. If I feel that dissexuality is a sickness, which I do feel it is a sickness, based on my studies and my calculations, then I would only will and trust that whatever I'm teaching is curing people of the sickness. So that's my perspective of that. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. We all have our path to walk. We all have our journey to make. And I love who I love, and I have students who I know are dissexuals, and I love them just the same as everyone else. All right. So getting back to our sun, moon, earth, and stars critical subject for the evening, right? And this goes right in alignment with what I'm talking about. So a lot of times I have people who come to me, right, and they have this disproportionate or deformity in their family life, and they don't realize that by having this deformity within their family or within their home, they're actually at a handicap as it comes to their spiritual potency, right? Because we've come into a Western mind state through, again, social construct where a lot of what we do is based off of individual achievement, or more so individual obtainment, right? So whether it's the obtainment of enlightenment or the obtainment of spiritual awakening, we imagine that it happens within a vacuum in our own backyard, because that's how we were taught that the greatest minds of our environment and our society and our spiritual pantheons have come to their awakenings. Whether it be Confucius, Buddha, Newton with the apple falling on top of his head and discovering gravity. Yeah, right. These people did these acts in solitude by themselves. This is so untrue. The greatest calculations that we've always come to as a people and as a collective has been as a people and as a collective. Children even learn best in groups. Okay, so for those of you who have this notion of the singular homes, and let's just get right into it. And I know for political correctness, and I probably, if I have not already offended some supporters, I'm sure I will before this segment is done. But life is short, the hell with it. I'm not really here to appease everyone, and I'm definitely not here to appease a sheep. And that's really what we're talking about and where we're at in society today, and even in our spirituality. So many people bring such wrong and just stupid information, and we just sheepishly follow it. And if someone says, wait a minute, let's think about this for a second, then they're vilified. And then so most people will keep their mouth shut in order to keep the sheep from off of them. But I mean, I've never really seen a sheep do any type of vicious damage to anyone. So I'm not really concerned if a sheep gets offended. If you're a sheep, you're not thinking, you're just following the herd. A good example is that show Scandals. People sending me these little stupid texts and stuff. Or Scandals. I guess there was a statement made last night where some woman named Olivia said, you have to earn me. And she's a mistress. I've never seen an episode of the show. I haven't seen 3 seconds of it. But I read the synopsis of it, and I understand it's about a woman who's sleeping with the president or something, and he's cheating with her. It's a black woman sleeping with this Caucasian president. And and everyone loves this show. They're so excited about it. And I find what's so interesting, especially amongst my students and listeners, the ones who send me little messages about it are the ones who have no family. So interesting. After I've taught so many episodes about how media programs and locks down your awareness and your light pathways, you now absorb and take in a show like this, which is basically programming you into being a side chick. Yeah. So it's real interesting. But this goes into what we're talking about now. So let's get right into the construct of sun, moon, earth, stars. Okay, the sun. We live in a solar system, and we use the word solar because obviously we're talking about a heliocentric model. A heliocentric, helio being sun, centric center. So a heliocentric model is a model of the universe where all of the components and bodies of that universe revolve around the sun, right? That's heliocentric or solar system. There was a time where we had a geocentric model. I can't really say we. There was a time when the Phoenicians, they pushed the geocentric model where everything revolved around the earth. And then after further study and understanding how gravitational pulls behave with one another as well as orbit, they understood that we're in a heliocentric model. Okay. So in dealing with heliocentrism or centricity, hold on, we have a caller. I did tell people that I would take calls this show because a lot of times I don't do that. So we're going to take a call and we're going to get right back into it. Yes, you have called into Foundational Fridays. Who's speaking? How can I help you?
Yes, this is Brother Hondo Solomon.
Hey, peace, brother. How you doing?
Excellent. How are you, brother?
Good. Everything's wonderful. What's going on with you today?
Oh, man, I just wanted to call in and support the show. I got back home and saw your post and wanted to call in, listen in, give my brother a shout out.
Beautiful, man. Appreciate that. Yeah, we're really speaking about, and this is a perfect opportunity. If those of you who don't know about Hondo Solomon, you need to Google him. He just released a book by the name of The Polygamous Papers, and he has another one, part 2 coming, as well as a larger volume on its way. And we're speaking about the spiritual construct of family, and I'm using the model of the sun, moon, and stars as a reference point to really make it simple. Because what I've been finding, not only in my consultations, but also within certain spiritual communities, is that there's a proliferation of divided and broken homes. And we've come to a point where we've accepted this social deformity. So even we'll say that, oh, well, there's many forms of family. You can have 2 mothers. You can have 2 fathers, and there are people who will promote this model, especially people who are children of this model. I've had many people say, my mother raised 5 of us and we turned out all right. And in this session, on this Friday, what I presuppose is, no, you didn't turn out all right. Regardless of what you may think, and this is an opportunity to re-examine, without the balance of male-female energy and the production of some type of fruit, whether they're children or whether there's some type of product, there's an imbalance in the home, there's an imbalance in your development moving forward. Brother Hondo, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree because, what's going on, we really have an Anglo ethic that dominates where we live at now. We're all you're broadcasting from the United States. There's an Anglo ethic that dominates. And the Anglo ethic is anti-male, anti-family, is even anti-woman on many levels. That's why many of the women's wombs are being destroyed. Even their thoughts are being destroyed about bearing children and helping to raise a family. And that's why you end up with the models. That's why you end up with the models that you've outlined with, it's okay to have 2 mothers in homosexuality. It's okay to have 2 fathers. It's homosexuality. And we know the only time that you should ever have 2 mothers at the same time is when we are engaging in what's called polygyny. Aside from that, Everything is backward. In fact, those models you mentioned have not actually produced any civilizations aside from this one, which is dysfunctional, because the children always come out a particular way, and they end up spreading that dysfunction outward among other people. So it's literally a disease, and I believe we've discussed this before.
Sure. One of the things that I wanted to highlight today, and it was a very good point, is that I was speaking to someone. You know, we speak about just even referencing the sun, moon, and stars to family, and my original introduction to this was through the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, peace be upon him, and that was when I first got the introduction as the man being the sun, the woman being the moon, and the child being the stars. And then later from Father Allah, who spoke about the woman also being earth. And one of the discussions I got into with a woman recently was she was saying that one of the reasons that the children are so wayward is because they're reflecting the light of the sun, which is the Father. So what we're seeing is the product of insane men. So I thought it would be great, because I've heard that one before, to kind of elucidate that a bit more on this show. And I'll start by saying that stars do not get, and we're talking about astronomy here, stars do not get their light from the sun. Stars are light years apart. The sun itself is actually a star. So a star itself actually is a ball of plasma, just like the sun. It's generating its own light, and the light that we're seeing those are photons that are being released, which take hundreds of thousands of years to even come out of the intense gravitational force of a star. So what's interesting about that is that once that light, that photonic light, which is a much cooler and slower particle. Okay, so by the time it turns into light, it's darn near dying at that point. So by the time we see the light, what's interesting is that light actually shines in an absolute straight line until it hits another object. Sometimes that object that it hits is your eye socket. So the only time that there's a perversion of the child or a perversion of the star is when something gets in the way of that light or that projection and distorts it. But it's not actually receiving its light from the sun. Interesting enough, if all the stars in our universe burnt out, it would probably have very little effect on the universe, other than it would affect our guidance systems, because you still have missile guidance systems that are guided using stars. But what's interesting is that we get direction from stars. So now let's correlate this to the children. We get spiritual direction from our children. Why? Because our children are ancestors who come back again, providing that direction. The sun provides nutrient. The sun provides information. The sun provides light. The earth, which is has an atmosphere that can sustain life, obviously sustains, or is supposed to sustain, the relationship between that sun and whatever is produced between the two of them. So Honda, let me get your insight on that, just in terms of the spiritual effect of what we're speaking about, the defamation of the family. How does it really hit to the spirituality or the perception of spirituality within the family construct?
Well, what you presented was the top level of the hierarchy of, what I call the heaven and earth principles, and that's everything in the heavens will reflect everything on earth. So when you're talking about families, a family, technically speaking, is a man married to a woman and at least one child, and that's reflected in the heavens, just as you mentioned. And when we don't have that, you always have fallout and destruction in civilization or in your local culture. It's always going to occur. Because, again, the heavens are screaming down to us. We can simply look up into the night sky, and even during the daytime, we see the sun out. Sometimes you can see the moon early in the morning when the sun is out. You can see the stars in the heavens. Everything is reflecting that mother, father, son or daughter principle, the mother, father, and child principle, everything. Plus, you mentioned cycles. Just as the heavens are on a cycle, we are also on cycles. They talk about the microcosm within the macrocosm. All of that pertains to what you mentioned about cycles. We're on a hourly, a daily, weekly, monthly, seasonal, yearly, and even a 7-year cycle. The Earth goes through a 7-year cycle where you're supposed to, in the Hebrew culture, they do this. You're supposed to not till that particular plot of land during the 7th year to give it a rest, and during the 50th. Mm-hmm. It's called a Jubilee year in the 50th. Then you have the cells of the body. All of the cells in your body are replaced with new cells every 7 years.
Right.
So everything you're mentioning is the top of the hierarchy, is right at the top of the pyramid. Mm-hmm. And we can simply look outward, outside of ourselves, and see how we're supposed to conduct our affairs here on Earth.
Right. Right. Beautiful. Beautifully put. We have another call in. I'm just going to take this one. All right. You're on Foundational Friday. Who's speaking? And what is your thought?
Greetings. This is Felicia. How are you?
I'm good. Peace. Thought it was you.
Peace. I just had a question because when we did a group ritual with the class last summer,
mm-hmm.
and one of the students had a question regarding family, and she was advised to work with the energy of Ogun, and we were all kind of shocked.
Right.
I was just curious to know how Ogun works with dealing with family, because she was trying to figure out how to help heal and mend issues in her family.
Right. Okay. Ogun, which is, when we're dealing with our angelic energies, we're dealing with Gabriel, right? And Gabriel and Ogun, they deal with mental insanity. Okay, solidifying us to anchoring points. Whenever you're dealing with Ogun, it's an energy of iron. We know that Ogun and iron are synonymous with one another. Gabriel, or Geb, is also a grounding energy of the earth. So that energy is about coming down into an anchor point. So when that comes up, when we're dealing with family, a lot of times what's happening is that a person, they're not taking the creation of family seriously. Okay, so the opposite energy of that would be like Oya, the woman of the winds. Okay, you're all over the place in the storm, and you need to anchor down. Okay, so that's what Ogun does. He cuts the mental insanity and makes you anchor down into a point, which is necessary, of course, and also Ogun is key when you need to heal rifts. He's a mediator between even warring countries, warring factions, warring people. He always comes and brings proper solution. Okay, and this is the energy, of course, of Gabriel as well, or Gabriel.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
That clarifies it.
All right, beautiful. Yeah, so we're here and we're talking about that energy of family and how it affects our spirituality, and I'm so glad that Brother Hondo called in and was able to definitely share some insight on that. And from another perspective, I know typically we only solely deal with spiritual issues, but I wanted to really show, or still want to show, how our spirituality is directly affected by our outlook of how we produce and correlate in coalition to other people in the world. There is a process, there is a give and take that occurs between, again, going through sun, earth, and star, or sun, earth, and child. And one of the things I wanted to speak about, which comes up a lot, and I'm sure Brother Hondo, you've probably seen this too, you can chime in on this, is when you have situations, and I have a lot of clients who come to me, women in particular, and they have their children, they're single mothers, quote unquote, and a lot of times I'll ask, okay, where's the father? How's the relationship? And they'll have a disagreement, and they'll say, well, look, I just took my children and left. I couldn't deal with it, so I just took my children and I left. And one of the things sometimes I have to impress upon them is that, your children have two parents. And by doing things like that, you're actually distorting their development. Because if you remove the light of the sun from this universe, the earth would die within minutes. The waters would freeze over, the air would freeze over, the wind currents would go insane, the gravitational pull would go out of whack. So if you're still existing and surviving to some degree after removing the sun of your family out of it, then you've actually replaced it with some other sun. but a lot of times it's son through proxy. So sometimes society becomes your new man, and you thinking you're making independent choices or independent decisions as a family without realizing you're still getting light or information from a source. It just may not be that direct source that you co-created with. Of course, this is always problematic. Of course, this is always something that should be avoided. And I want to also speak about for a minute, and I'm going to ask Brother Hondo's opinion on this. When you have situations, one of the things that I always tell people, as a man, we have to know how much light, if we are the sun, how much light to give to the earth. If we give too much light, we'll scorch the surface. So light being information and knowledge. Sometimes, and I've been guilty of this spiritually. I learned something and I immediately wanted to share it with my partner without realizing that that's being an irresponsible steward of my home. If I give too much light before certain understanding takes root within my family, just like if you give too much light to a plant before it's allowed to root properly, you'll destroy the plant. So you have to let it root before you expose it to a certain amount of sunlight, information, so forth and so on. So that also pertains to warring. Whenever there's a war between parents, they always have to realize that war always occurs on the earth. The battleground is always earth. And what's being produced and created on that earth currently are children. So whenever you have a situation with a spouse or a mate, let's say even if you're separated and you co-created previously, and you make the choice to go to war, especially spiritual war. I get a lot of people with that one. I want to do this to them and I want to do that to them. You're not realizing that if your mate, your woman, more specifically, is sustaining the children at the time, sustaining their life, you're actually affecting the earth that they're currently residing on. Okay, so sometimes it's actually best to pull back some of your love spiritually and emotionally in order to maintain the spiritual balance that needs to be. Of course, when you co-create with someone, co-parenting and maintaining the cohesion of the family is always choice number one. It should be the primary essential when possible. But I always want you to think about, especially for the men, and we've had this discussion a lot of my students and clients, what happens when you actually go in as a son and go full blast on the earth? You destroy it. So I wanted to get, of course, Brother Hondo's take on that one.
Man, I mean, that was hitting home, man. That was hitting home. Men like us are very intense, especially very artistic men who have a tendency of creating with their hands, painters, musicians, right, singers. A lot of times we're introverted when we're creating, but if people disturb those waters, it's almost like a still pond. You come in with an asteroid and you just throw it in there. Right. You totally thrown the whole biosphere off. I mean, it's everything in the pond, everything around the pond, in the forest, everything, and you see and you feel the disruption and you hear it. It's a full sensory overload, and a lot of times men like us, and we've had this discussion too. We react instead of acting upon our environment and toward those we love. We're too intense, and that's something that I have had to learn. And I've seen other men do it, even when I'm out and about. And I say, he could probably, ease up on sis a little bit, or, maybe that could have waited. And it's a learning process because we're not taught these spiritual principles. Most of us, not here anyway, in North America and the West in general. We're not really taught to be grounded, and it's something that we have to learn later. But you can ruin a relationship because you're too intense at the wrong time. Right. Right. It's the timing that's important too, not just the level of light that you're giving to the earth. That's very, very appropriate. When you speak about time, one of the things that occurs because of the mass, the massive mass of the sun, this universe's sun, is that it has the ability to bend space and time. So even when we look at the speed that light travels, which is 12,000 feet per second,
a lot of times we look at it in terms of Earth feet, Earth time, but it's actually different because of the mass of the sun. This is the reason why when the sun sinks down below the horizon, you still have light outside. And the reason that is because the light is actually being bent over the horizon, the refraction of those light waves. So it's very interesting what you just said about time. And again, these are all, whatever is expressing itself through astronomy or through our physical environment, these are all abilities and skills that we have within ourselves, spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, and otherwise. So that ability to bend time or to bend space, or like you just said, maybe this could have happened another time. Maybe I can shape, what needs to happen later. I need to shine my light over the horizon, so maybe it's even less intense at another time. Is very key also in our discussion of the spiritual family, sun, moon, stars, earth. One key thing to remember too is that the moon's light is a reflection of sunlight, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier about regardless if you have a mate in your house or not, and I'm speaking to the women here, you're reflecting some male's light. Now I know a lot of times when I said, the first reaction from certain women is, well, don't we all have man, woman inside of us? Well, technically you got man, woman, and child inside of you. Based on the model that we've understood, even in terms of how stars work, I would take a quote from the occultist Aleister Crowley, who said every man and every woman is a star, which is a commonly overlooked piece. But what did he mean by that? What he's speaking about is that, again, it's that guidance system. The stars represent you at your highest, at your higher self. So your manifestation here on the earth, as the old Christians used to say, this place is not my home. We live in the world, but we're not of it. Because though we have certain rules that we have to follow while we're here in the flesh, there's another space in which we also reside in at the same time. So it's really critical when we think about, again, as I spoke in the beginning of the show, the heliocentric model of the universe, or the solar system where the sun lies at its center, not necessarily being the most important component, but it's kind of like a chess game. All of the players are important, and even the queen has the most ability on the board. But if the queen gets caught, the game goes on. If the king gets caught, everything gets shut down. So if you block the light of that sun, the earth dies. Everything gets shut down. I want you to keep this in mind for all my clients and supporters who, contact me about issues, especially with their children. And whenever I mention, well, maybe you need to partner, you need to form family, there's this stiffening that occurs. That stiffening is your ego. As we've learned so many times, as I've taught you, the ego is Satan. Satan, or Set, is your egoic or human thought that keeps you earthbound, and it will stiffen up. Once it stiffens up, your DNA is not absorbing. It's not receiving any new information. That's the ego's job, to keep you from evolving. So I kind of wanted to speak on that, and I'm going to give Hondo another chance to respond before we close out.
Well, yeah, the last part that you said, I want to make sure that, I understand you correctly about the ego preventing you from learning new material. It seems to me that when people are too self-absorbed, again, it goes back to the principle of heaven and earth. They can't really receive things that are outside of themselves. What we call, when we want to get deeper, called the cosmos. Because we're the microcosm. Everything else outside of us is the macrocosm. You're too self-absorbed and you're not other-centered. It's self-centered versus being other-centered. And I speak about that, too, in all my books, really, on communitarian ethics. You have to be able to be balanced, because you can't have those gaps in information and wisdom and knowledge filled except from other people and from outside sources, because you're one person in one place and time, and you've had particular experiences and patterns that are unique to you. Mm-hmm. If you're too self-absorbed, you can't get anything because you blocked it. And hopefully I'm following the same track here with what you were saying. That hit me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. You're right on point. You're right in alignment. And what we're speaking about is communitarianism. And again, when we speak about community, as I've stated in, solutions for dysfunctional family relationships, your community is a reflection of your family model. Your family model is a reflection of your individual organization of your own community. So if you have an internal community where you have hatred towards women, then your family is going to reflect a model that has hatred towards women, and your community is going to reflect a model that has hatred towards women. And the same thing goes for if you have hatred towards what you produce as an individual, you'll have hatred towards your children within your family. Your community will have the same thing. So as you said, we're a microcosmic representation of the macrocosmic, not just universe and cosmos, but even a macrocosmic social structure. So this has been a wonderful opportunity to build with you. And, of course, we do have a segment that's forthcoming with you and I. And this was impromptu. I'm glad you called in, as well as Felicia and those. We have some other calls here, but I wasn't able to get to them. But I will next time. But in any event, Hondo, let people know how they can find your works and, how they can catch up with you.
All right, my name is Hondo Solomon, Hondo, Solomon like the biblical king. I'm the author of The Polygamous Papers, Volume 1, An Introduction to Polygamous Culture and Its Principles, Pitfalls, and Ethics. Volume 2 is coming this August. The title is Blood and Kindred, Economic Warfare Strategy for Polygynous Families. That book will be 300 pages, chock full of information on understanding and applying polygyny in a modern context, no matter where you go on this earth. I wanted to also give my information. You can reach me at hondo.solomon@gmail.com. It's my email address. You can reach me there. You can also find me on YouTube. You can type in my name, Hondo Solomon, and you'll see my username, Hondo Solomon7. Or you can type in Polygamy Universe. Polygamy Universe is the name of my YouTube channel. You can also find me on Facebook at Hondo Solomon, where you just type in polygamy. You will see my main page in parentheses. You don't want to go to the fan page, and I'm going to take those down. You want to go to my main page if you want to follow, subscribe, or to invite me to your page. And I appreciate Brother Haru for having me on and letting me give my piece.
Oh, it's all good, brother. I'm glad you called in, like I said. So there you have it, spiritual family. And, of course, I'll probably will be doing a part 2 of this one because there was some things I want to get into. And I try not to really get too technical on this particular segment, but we will get technical. All right, so, I always have to bring my nerd energy into the discussion. But with that, this has been another segment of Foundational Fridays. I appreciate your participation. Look out for next strong show. We got some really interesting topics this month for those of you who've got the newsletter. Registered students, make sure you join the new Facebook, our new spiritual training group. It's only for students, okay? So this is different than the page. All right, so join the group, our new spiritual training, and, we have some real interesting and good people in there who are sharing their ideas and their experiences. With that, I'm Yuya, Assaan-ANU, and I will see you all in 7 days. Peace.